Get started. Maria and Mohammed are out today, but we do have a quorum, so we can get started. I think I call the meeting into order. Shall we begin with introductions? My name is Stephanie Britt. I work for SCTA CPA.
Dana Trey with SCTA RCPA.
Chris Barney, SCTA RCPA.
John Gaffney, Golden Gate Transit.
Tony Huntsberger with the Human Services Department. Cortez, Dalton Aging Human Services.
Angela Conti, resident, County.
Nancy Frank, age-friendly Petaluma.
Colin Tillman, Disability Services and Legal Center.
Thank you for the introductions. And just a quick modification to the agenda. We're going to do Petaluma age-friendly first. That's item 6, and then County Master Plan, item 5. Oh, sorry.
Folks online.
Oh, and folks online, please.
Hello, my name's Linda Chaffin. I'm from Cloverdale, just the thorn in your side here to remind you that we have no portal-to-portal service here at all in the northern North County. And we'd sure like you to address that at some point. Maybe even a token program where it's reimbursement, so you don't have to worry about where you're going to get the money, because if nobody actually uses it, then you've already done the test, just a thought.
I'm Robin Thompson with the Sonoma County Aging and Disability Commission.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to introduce themselves? I don't see anyone else.
And
All
then
right.
I will add that we have Dawn Streeper from Area Agency on Aging District 1 and Tracy Beards as well.
Thank you, Drew. Now we can move on to item 2, which is public comments. These are public comments on items not on the regular agenda, which can be made in person or on Zoom. Any public comments in the room first? Any public comments from Zoom? Seeing none, we're moving on to item 3, approval of the meeting notes from September 17th. Would anyone like to make a motion? Yes. Any second?
Second.
Appreciate it. And we vote, right? Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? Any abstain? Okay, this motion passes. Cool beans. And now the next item on the agenda is member appointments. We have 4 new members to our committee. That's a very big addition. We're very grateful to have you join. For this, we need 4 members to approve the motion. The current member has to make the motion. Would anyone like to make the motion? Okay, thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? 2. It was John Gaffney.
Second.
It was John Gaffney. Vote, did we get the 3 votes? Yep. Okay, great. This motion passes. Your members, yay. For new members that are here, do you want to introduce yourself? Yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself briefly to the committee?
Yes, my name's Angela Conti. Born and raised in Sonoma County, left for a while for a career, returned about 15 years ago, cared for family members. I am aging. I have health issues. I am very focused on participating in my community as much as I can. I was introduced to this through the late aging.
It's a local aging and disability action plan. It's a side project with the master plan for aging.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
thank you. That's what got me here.
Oh, we're grateful to get your feedback. Thank you for joining. I'll try to bring donuts as often as possible. I don't think we have any other new members here. No.
I'm just representing the Transit.
Okay, great. Then, thank you. And now we can move on to item 6, which is Petaluma Age-Friendly Action Plan. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, so we have a slide there. I don't know if you can see it. I'm just, since I didn't know exactly who would be at the table, I wanted to start back and frame it and give a little bit of perspective. But age-friendly communities is a concept and a movement that was started by World Health Organization. And AARP became the manager of it in North America. By 2034, older adults 65 plus will outnumber the number of children under 18 in this country. Nearly 100 million people in 698 communities live in an age-friendly town, county, territory, or state that is enrolled in the AARP network of age-friendly states and communities. That includes the state of California and Sonoma County and the city of Petaluma, and there are other cities in Sonoma that I didn't brush up on. Petaluma joined the age-friendly network in early 2020. I want to sort of point out the flower to you because the age-friendly communities concept has domains where all the domains need to be age-friendly. And so that includes transportation, housing, social participation, respect and social inclusion, civic participation and employment, communication and information, community support and health services, and outdoor spaces and buildings. Now, having said that, when communities join the age-friendly movement, it doesn't mean they're already age-friendly. It means they agree to conduct a plan, a needs assessment, a plan, and head towards becoming more friendly. In that process, they very often change the words they use and the clusters that they use. And so this flower is a concept. It's not always implemented that way. Next slide. So just to acknowledge that a lot of the planning that is going on these days is looking at older adults and persons with disability, whether they're age 55 and older or not, because some of the needs and supports have heavy overlap. Right now in Petaluma, which is disproportionately older adult, 32% of the population is 55 plus. It's grown phenomenally. And the reasons it's grown phenomenally is not just that there's a bubble of 45 to 55 or 55 to 65s moving into that cohort, but people are living so much longer, they're staying at the higher end of the age cohort longer, so they're not aging out, and that's part of what this bulge is about. Next slide. So Chris Rebelo and I, on a volunteer basis, agreed to conduct Petaluma's age-friendly survey back in 2020. And little did we know that COVID would hit just months later and we would be faced with trying to pull this off during COVID. And in fact, it ended up taking 4 to 5 years. But what we did is a community survey that netted us over 900 survey responses, which is almost double what you usually get for a survey in Petaluma. We did it carefully, we targeted, we even went out a second time. It is underrepresented in the Latinx population and the very isolated, because especially during COVID, how to find those folks and get the survey into their hands was pretty limited. We also interviewed 10 department heads in the city and had a focus group with 8 community leaders, and we came out with some findings. Next slide. So I think that it's always, when you're looking at what needs to be better, really important to start with what works. And so we asked folks, how does Petaluma rate as a place to age? And it's really important that 69% said that it was excellent or good place to age, and 79% reported that it was important or very important to remain in Petaluma as they age. So allegiance to Petaluma and devotion to Petaluma and being happy with Petaluma was very high. It is also important to recognize that those ratings did not correlate to how long people had been in Petaluma, and it did not correlate with income or education levels, which actually surprised me. Next, trying to get to things that I think interest this group, I'm just pulling out a couple of snapshots. Remember that we are surveying during COVID. So before COVID, what were their most common forms of exercise? And it's really important to notice that 81% reported walking and hiking several times a week or more, most of them. And that we are a walking community, and that has a high impact for parks, trails, sidewalks, streets, street crossings, and all. It's an active group anyway. The yoga, Pilates, et cetera, is up at 30%. It starts declining, but just to say that people are begging to be able to do those things outdoors in the parks. And biking was right up there with 22%. Next. So on streets and transportation, there are a couple interesting things about this slide. We asked them, does Petaluma have adequate X, Y, or Z? And the greens, this chart goes from the most to the least in the greens, the yes. Audio-visual pedestrian crossings, affordable public transportation, well-lit, safe streets, intersections for walkers, bikers, drivers. But notice by that question, the no's are up to 34%. So as the green is declining, the reds are tending to go back up. The other thing you'll note, if you look at safe public transportation stops, reliable public transportation, benches and shade, the overwhelming response is that people don't know. And that is, we found throughout for all sorts of services, people don't know until they need it. And the minute they need it, they need to know how to find out about it. And so they're off looking for information with short notice. These are probably drivers who don't get out and walk around and know these things. Going to the bottom under well-maintained streets, the no's have it up at 65%. Well, that was 2020. And we have received a lot of money for streets and sidewalks, and everybody sees the improvements that are coming along. And so really important to recognize that and recognize that this information is a little bit dated. Next. So again, street and park features, 74% said well-maintained, safe parks in walking distance. 67% public parks with enough benches, drinking fountains, and shade. That is kind of interesting because more recently we're hearing more demand for benches, drinking fountains, and shade. Sidewalks in good condition, you'll notice the no's are almost as high as the yeses. Again, those are improving. Protected bike lanes, the majority don't know, but the no's edge out the yeses, and that's improving in Petaluma. And well-maintained public restrooms that are accessible to all. There is a high demand for that and an increasing demand for that in our community. So at that time, with the survey, the interviews with city staff and community leaders, we had some minor snapshots of needs that long-term municipal efforts, and which means money from somewhere and outside, housing, availability, cost, and a continuum of appropriateness, whether it's physical accessibility or whether it's assisted. Climate change management popped out at the top all the way through. Walkability and bikeability all the way through. Transportation all the way through. Important to recognize that we are now piloting LumaGo, which you probably have heard about. So there's stuff happening. I don't want any of the negatives that I'm saying here to suggest that things have been standing still. I think it's also important here to note the slant of a city action plan as opposed to a county action plan, which you're also going to hear about, which is cities don't have their own health departments. And they don't have robust responsibilities for human services. They have some. And they have, so Countywide has a different set of priorities in terms of governance than city. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this and let it expand to county. So we didn't focus on a lot of things that are fairly outside of our bandwidth or jurisdiction. And medical health supports fell heavily there. But we did identify some potentially smaller, faster improvements. Next slide. Sorry. Big cries for safety, lighting, fall prevention in parks, disaster preparation, and safety at bus stops. Outdoor amenities, quality of life, park improvement, social recreational activities in these settings, public bathrooms. Transportation, nobody had imagined Lumago, but at that point, I've seen other cities that have had taxi vouchers or something that can make a drop in the bucket of what the need is for personalized care. And we also found, and I don't know if y'all in Santa Rosa think about it all that much, but in Petaluma, if you need specialty medical care, you basically got to go to Santa Rosa or San Rafael. Transportation there is pretty difficult. And support to meet basic needs. Okay. So then many months later, after COVID, we solidified this and we pulled the community together and we had a 4 or 5 hour retreat with 25 staff and community members. And we tried to distill this further in terms of which of these priorities rise to the top and where do we start. There were 2 cross-cutting issues that kept popping up. One was the need for more information and support for accessing care, services, and resources for healthy living. Again, noting that accessing resource for supports and services is very heavily a county responsibility, and the hub has happened now and the resource guide is more robust. But folks where we are, they also want to address isolation and engagement in the same manner. So they want a single website where you can go and get a live link to the hub or get a live link to happy hours in town or get a live link to volunteer activities, but one source. And just as I mentioned about people saying they don't know what the bus system is, or they don't know if transportation is available. If there were a single source, they could go there and find the live link and click to the right place rather immediately. The other thing that people really, we have a phenomenal volunteer culture, but we feel like, I guess, twofold. One is that seniors are invisible. And if you look at the probably thousands and thousands of seniors that volunteer on everything from the city council to the street crossing guards, and the stigma about being older, that if we could call them out and give everybody, you know, I'm a member of the Elder Corps t-shirts, that the visibility of how much they contribute would help destigmatize aging. But the other part, probably more important, is that there are so many seniors who would volunteer, which would increase engagement and also increase the people power of the community if they knew how to connect. And so we were looking for a way to have a single source for volunteering. And we have not kicked that off yet. We're still kind of, how do you get in the path of the money? I was asked to talk, I wanted to just go through the other priorities that were not cross-cutting. Communications, which I've really touched on. Housing, build on the early success. I mean, there's housing built like crazy, but it needs to be a continuum. It needs to be affordable. Streets and transportation, again, maintain that momentum. Health and community services, foster vitality and longevity by providing education and access to resources. Social civic participation, engagement with passionate people. Again, this predates the county plan. Where it drilled down deeper in transportation is, again, maintaining momentum for greater impact. And in my book, that means being on top of how to get in the path of funds. And the city has made great progress in this area. Additional priorities in transportation and public spaces were improved access to personal options, and there's Lumago, better walking and biking environments, and that hits sidewalks, wheelchair access, bike lanes, bathrooms, benches, shade, senior hubs, more gathering spaces for intergenerational use, and space for social day programming. Now I was, in terms of, next, there. So again, in terms of implementation, it comes down to funding, but we have there are two ways to do that. One is to get to all of your departments and all of your nonprofits and have them know these priorities so that when they are allocating their funds and designing their programming, they can include this thinking into it. And that is the most viable place to start. The other is to raise funds and identify community champions to lead these efforts. I was asked to speak briefly about state and county context. I'm going to speak to state a little and hand it over. But the California Master Plan for Aging, they kind of started in 2020, although we all didn't really hear about it till a little bit later. And I think it's really important to know that A, they are an age-friendly community. B, they're using different vocabulary, and the master plan has different domains. But if you crosswalk their domains with the original domains, they're kind of all there. They're just presented differently. So their top areas are housing for all stages and ages, but they include transportation, outdoor spaces, emergency prep, and climate change under housing. Okay. Health reimagined, aging in place, access, affordability, beginning at birth, dementia, nursing home innovation. That's really important at a state level. Inclusion, equity, not isolation. We've all got that. Caregiving that works. I was thrilled to see them have it because we can't tackle that on a city level. And it's a very, very high need. And it's another one of those ones that people aren't going to tell you it's a need in the survey because they've never needed it yet. So they haven't thought about it. If you talk to caregivers, however, you get a different response. And then affordable aging. And then on my last page, I don't know if you got these with your packets or whatever, I just put a couple of live links to things. The AARP, the National Aging Priorities, the California Master Plan, and the Sonoma County Plan, although you may have a better link, and us.
Thank you. And we can share these links over our email list.
Okay.
Any comments, questions?
So did I pitch that to you well?
Very well. And I would just commend you on the data that you collected for 900 people in Petaluma. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
I have a question. So are there plans to actually re-ask the questions or administer the survey on some sort of cadence to check in and see how things are proceeding or changing over time?
No, it's really interesting because I kind of do this for a living too. I'm in another community right now and we did our survey back then and we went out and we did redo it.
Yeah.
But these priorities are so clear and so unanimous that energy could well go into implementation and not re-asking at this point. AARP asks you to be on about a 3 to 5 year cycle to revisit.
Great.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same since you're a volunteer. When you get to that 5-year point, is there a department in the city or city staff that's going to look at the different strategies and sort of reassessed, and they call it age-friendly 2.0.
Yeah. We're in the process of trying to hash that out. We have a meeting coming up in December, and I think that there's, I know y'all are familiar with Petaluma. We have a bandwidth problem. And so I guess there was agreement with that. So who owns it, where it lives, and who drives it is still something we're trying to work out with no additional funding. But trying to get in the path of funding.
I do want to confirm that I did include this presentation with those links in the agenda packet that was sent out to this committee and is posted online.
Thank you so much, Drew. Are there any questions or comments online?
Seen any?
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I think we all learned a lot today. Moving on to item 5, County Master Plan for Aging.
Yeah, sure. This one. So I'm Joni Hunsberger and I'm the Master Plan for Aging Implementation Coordinator, and
Kathleen Cortez, and I worked on the plan development with the steering committee.
so today I'm really excited to talk to you. We want to talk a little bit just about the Master Plan for Aging in Sonoma County and how it may connect with work that you're already doing or work that you're thinking about. So we'll start off just to give you an idea of where we're going with, and this will really just flow nicely with what Nancy said. Just again, a reminder of why do we even need a master plan for aging in our area? And then how did this plan come about? And really then the alignment with transportation. We have 6 goal areas in the master plan. So talking more specifically about where there's alignment with transportation. So that's where we're headed. And if we want to go to the next slide, just a reminder again, right? This is very similar to what Nancy was saying, but seeing the huge need for services for our adult and aging community in our aging community, specifically in California. So this is data from the California State Master Plan for Aging. And, I think maybe we should just round up to 82 years. Our life expectancy is growing. And when you look at that, and then you look at the data on the left-hand side of the screen, we see that between 2010 and 2030, the number of adults that are 60 and older will more than double, right? So a massive increase in the state. And then again, also the demographic shifts, right? If we look at the bottom, the gray represents our white non-Hispanic community. And then the green is our Hispanic Latino community. Purple is Asian, Native American, Asian and Pacific Islander. And then we have our Black, non-Hispanic, multiracial, and American Indian. And you'll see the shift from 2010. We had nearly over 60% people that were over 60 identified as white. And then moving to 2030, a massive shift to just a little over 20% identifying as white, with the bulk of people really being those that are Hispanic, Latino, and Asian and Pacific Islander. So huge shifts both in the number of people over 60 and in the demographic makeup of people over 60. And if we want to go to the next slide, again, it's the same thing in our local community, right? In Sonoma County, our adult community, our aging community is the fastest growing population. Today, 28% of residents are 60 or older, and by 2030, 35% will be 60 or older. So more than 1 in 3 people will be 60 or older. So this just brings us to this huge need for the master plan for aging. So at the state level, the master plan for aging was put out in 2019, 2020, a few years ago. And then we launched the Sonoma County master plan a few years ago. And if we go to the next slide, I'm actually just going to take a second and read this quote to you from the California Master Plan for Aging, because this is where we want to go. This is our hope and our dream and what we want to do here. And it says, as Californians, we can create communities where people of all ages and abilities are engaged, valued, and afforded equitable opportunities to thrive as we age, how and where we choose. And then I want to pause for just a minute and talk about one word in there. And the word that I want to focus on is equitable, and how we want to embody equity within the master plan for aging. I think it's a word that we hear a lot about, and that's a great thing. And I want to talk for just a second about how we really see that weaving into and being the foundation for the master plan for aging. So to start with, one way to look at it is to look at, there's a framework called designing for the margins. And if we're looking at a framework around designing for the margins, and you sort of envision our community as a circle, right? And at the very center of the circle are the people and the groups. It's typically the dominant culture groups that have the largest voice. They have the loudest voice. They have the biggest say in how our systems are created, how they're implemented, and in who gets what resources. And so that's sort of the center. And the further out you go, the closer you get to the margins. And we can really look at, in many ways, we can look at our older adult community, and most of them, many of them exist on the margins. They are not the center of control and power. They are the beneficiaries of many systems that they're not controlling. And then even further to the margins, we have older adults who are members of communities of color, or we have older adults who are disabled or lower income, and they have even less control. So when we talk about equity in our community, we're talking about both an outcome and a process. And the outcome looks at that whole circle, and we look at well-being for everybody within our society. And we want to see zero difference in outcomes based on race, based on ability, based on age. Everybody has common outcomes. That would be an equitable society. And the process is really going back to sort of that designing from the margins process, whereby we explicitly value the voices, the experiences, and the contributions of the people that are closest to the margins in the creation of the systems that we implement. And that's what we're really aiming for with our local plan for aging. That's what we want to do as we move through all of our different priority areas and solutions. So with that as our foundation, we can head to the next slide, and I'm going to turn over to Kathleen to talk about how we got here.
Yeah, so the master plan for aging was started, the initiative in 2023. We started by hiring collaborative consulting to help us look at analyzing the data, interviewing stakeholders, and really helping develop the plan. And so we started with a general recruitment for steering committee members. We were looking for people with lived experience in the community, people that represented the different districts in the county, as well as industry experts from housing, healthcare, caregiving, as well as aging and disability experts and industry workers. So from there, we interviewed, the consultants interviewed over 40 stakeholders from the various aging and disability service providers, from our culturally based community organizations. We interviewed people from housing, health, caregiving, and the different transportation, the different elements from our state master plan. And then they did a deep dive, the consultants, looking at our survey data that we've done throughout the years, as well as our area agency on aging community needs assessment. They looked at the MTC coordinated plan, portrait of Sonoma, other local plans and reports that have been done. And from all of the data in the interviews and in what we learned, 6 goal areas emerged from this research and development. Next slide.
And so these are the 6 goal areas that Kathleen mentioned. And we're going to spend most of the rest of our time talking about transportation and the priorities there. And before we do that, want to just acknowledge that we can't, really take any one of these priorities areas and pull it out and work with it in isolation. Right? They're all interconnected in the way that they support each other. If you have a phenomenal healthcare system in Santa Rosa, but people don't have transportation to get to it, you're falling short, right? You see the same thing with housing as healthcare. All of these are integrated together. I was last week at the Petaluma Senior Advisory Commission, and the woman who was chairing the commission, she was talking about how Petaluma has, they have free transit now for this next year. And she decided that with that in place, she was going to ride the bus for a day, and she was going to talk to as many people as she could just to learn, how is this impacting you? Did you know that it's changed? And so she said, the most powerful story that came out of it, she was talking to an older gentleman, and he said, you know what? This has absolutely changed my life. He said, I take transit every day to and from work, and I spend about $50 a month on it before this free initiative. He said, for the first time in my life this year, I bought school supplies for my daughter when she went back to school because of the money I'd saved, right? So you have the transportation, and it's woven in with economic stability, and then it's multi-generational. So it's all of these goal areas that we look at holistically, and then we have individual goals within each of them, which I'll hand it off to Kathleen.
Yep, so next slide. So yeah, what we heard from the stakeholder interviews in the needs assessment, that it was clear that transportation for older adults in Sonoma County was a priority need, and it stood out on its own. As Nancy mentioned, unlike the state master plan where transportation is sort of buried in the housing element, in Sonoma County, it was identified as an urgent priority need for our older adults. Without accessible transportation, older adults and people with disabilities risk isolation and adverse healthcare outcomes. Transportation is a key component to living well, thriving, and the ability to live in one's home and age in place. And so what we did with the transportation goal is we really want to make transportation accessible and safe for our older adults and people with disabilities, regardless of where they live. So numerous strategies were identified, but for the initial implementation, we really want to look at advocating for improved transportation options. We want to see more accessible options with expanded hours and service areas and safety. And as Nancy mentioned, we thought that expanding voucher programs to address barriers such as rideshare vouchers, mileage reimbursement, and gas vouchers is an easier step to do initially. A lot of our healthcare organizations and some health insurance plans do offer rideshare vouchers and mileage reimbursement for patients. So we want to expand on that for the first year and look at how we can coordinate our transportation efforts and funding to really address the transportation barrier. Next slide. So some of the needs that were identified for transportation, really our rural areas are the most impacted. We know that in rural areas, there are further, more remote, further away from services in the urban area, and that the bus routes are fewer and far for people to get access to services in the areas when they need it. So Sonoma County really lacks a same-day on-demand dial-a-ride type services. We see them in other cities, in other counties that are offered for older adults where you can just call up and get a ride that same day. So that is something that emerged as a need. We know that older adults' healthcare appointments are their #1 need as they age in place. We need to figure out a way to get more affordable and frequent medical transportation to our seniors in all areas of the county. Another thing that emerged from the research was that a lot of the transportation information is accessible through digital applications. Our older adults and people with disabilities are not as comfortable accessing information that way. They wanted to see more mobility management services that are more user-friendly, less dependent on technology, more accessible in multilingual or multi-languages, as well as brought to the neighborhood level into the culturally based organizations where they can get transportation information to their own language and for their own neighborhoods. So those are several of the needs that we really saw in our research. And again, we just know that transportation is a major priority and need for our older adults. Next slide.
Kathleen, do you want us to save questions or should we ask them? Yeah.
All right, so we'll just, with that in place, talk through sort of what our next steps are with the master plan for aging in terms of engaging the community and really making this something that is community driven and is community owned as the master plan moves forward. So we're starting off with regional presentations that are really focused on what does that community need and where are their highlights. So in December, we'll be having a presentation with Supervisor Hopkins in Guerneville and really focusing again there on transportation. They said a couple different sources. This is really where our biggest need is. Let's talk about this. We'll be doing that across the different districts in Sonoma County. And then from there, we're also in the process of forming action teams, and it's one action team for each goal area. So one for transportation, for healthcare, equity and inclusion, and so on. And those are open to anybody who wants to participate on them. And right now we'll be starting the caregiving action team in December and then building out from there and really you know, it's at this point, we'll just be setting the framework of how these teams are going to implement, but they will be the ones that carry this work forward, that look at the priorities, the strategies, that select which ones they're going to adopt and focus on first, and then move those forward in the community. And we'll be doing that with, again, with the equity forward focus. So bringing all the action teams together in the spring for training on equity and how to implement and integrate equity into the priorities as they carry out those strategies going forward. And then one other piece that I'll add that's not on here is just, you know, probably not till summer or maybe late summer, early fall, we'll also be looking at, and Nancy raised this question, funding, right? We need funding to move all of this forward, and bringing together interested, whether it's groups or individuals that are interested in grant seeking, and then pulling together partners in the community that could collaborate to apply for grants together. So creating that space for people to come together to talk through grant opportunities and how they might apply and implement those together if they receive them. So that's where we're headed with implementation right now. And now we're ready for that slide. Perfect. And we're on to questions. These are some just to consider how this fits with you, but we're also just open to any questions that you'll have. Okay.
Nice, great presentation. Actually, we're just dealing with a question from MTC about plans that prioritize projects for all ages and abilities. So is there a place to get this plan offline that you have?
Slide.
Great, great.
It's there's a regular link in my one too.
Yeah, and there's a link in the packet.
Okay,
On the the Adult and Aging website, there's
Great,
a
great.
page for Master Plan on Aging.
Great.
It's included on there.
Then other questions. I noticed in your presentation about Petaluma, I think you used the age of 55.
Yeah, sometimes
then-
you use 55, sometimes it's 65.
And then all our transportation stuff is at 65. So
I'll tell you a
just to-
little bit about that.
yeah, yeah.
With Area Agents on Aging, we get a lot of funding for Older Americans Act. And that's a federal program, and the age those services are available to people that are age 60 and over, or adults with disabilities 18 and over. And then AARP, I believe, and MTC, I know the FTA 5310, they look at 65 and over. So you really have to look at the data and see, you know, what age group are we talking about here? But for Adult and Aging, we service age 60 and over, or look at for this data collection was age 60 and over.
So I think that's just
Finessing it constantly because
Right,
the funding
right.
sources all have different.
right,
ages.
right, right. So I mean, in terms of trying to meet your goals of serving seniors, maybe we just live with the inconsistency of definitions, but that would be, if there was a way to, at a regional level, reduce the discounts to 60, that would be a huge benefit to seniors. But, you know, we're obviously driven by FTA's definition historically, I think. I don't know if it's FTA or just a regional definition. I mean, as a region, you know, as a region, we're all going to be on the same page. So something to look at if that's worth pursuing. And then kind of one of your slides talked about, and this is something that I always kind of wrestle with, which is there was a focus on rural communities, maybe because the need's the highest there. I just, you know, I'm just trying to think back on the demographic maps in terms of where's the concentration. I mean, I know Sonoma County is huge, right? But you know, a lot of times in transportation, at least, we're looking at where are the population centers. So is there, I guess my question, you know, as much as you want to focus on rural, is there a way to serve more seniors by having some focus on denser areas of seniors? And are those denser areas traditionally in the urban area? And if they are, you know, some of the programs may change. We may be able to serve more people with, you know, lower hanging fruit, I guess is kind of my, you know, lower hanging, easier to implement it, at least transportation wise in higher density areas, you can serve more people. So that's just a question and comment.
I can add to that, one piece that we're considering as we put the action teams into place around each of these priority areas is that there will need to be, if you're looking at transportation as a priority area or healthcare, the needs across Sonoma County are so vastly different, right? And Cloverdale is very different than Santa Rosa. For each of these areas, there may be need for some shorter lived or maybe longer lived, I don't know, we'll see, ad hoc committees that really focus on transportation in Santa Rosa or transportation in Cloverdale because it's going to be so different. So there will have to be a directed focus, I think, to make progress initially. And I think that that's a great point, right? That there are some of those lower hanging areas of, we do this here, it's going to touch a lot of people while we build out what can be done in the more rural areas.
Right. I mean, more rural areas, I can see, the need for individualized transportation, but in the urban areas, where you have higher frequency bus service or access, that education piece might be a bigger piece, or the paratransit services where there is that opportunity for individual transportation where you might not need voucher programs as much, or maybe you need both, but.
Yeah, what I've heard, I mean, like in Cloverdale, Linda was mentioning earlier, historically, they have not had taxi service there, rideshare service there. I believe there was an SCT bus, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. So if you had a 2 o'clock medical appointment in Santa Rosa, you had to get on an 8 a.m. bus, and then you had to get out of there in time to get the 5 o'clock bus or wherever. So it's quite challenging in different areas. And then in the coastal areas, I did a focus group up there where I heard, they're not comfortable driving in inclement weather, the daylight changing, they don't like driving in the dark. So, services that need to be expanded so that, they can capture those areas of need. But it is different for different regions.
And do we have a comment from Linda Fonsu?
That's exactly right, Kathleen. And I really appreciate, I was a hospital administrator for years, and I certainly understand the low hanging fruit and the bang for the buck kind of thinking. But now that I'm an elderly person in Cloverdale, it becomes very personal for me. In the other areas where there's a higher demographic of seniors and a higher population in general, there are other options for people in those areas as well that are in place as we speak. And it's not just we have a need in a rural area, we have a need with no options. If I lose my driver's license, I don't have any way to get around. If I have to have a knee replaced and you have to get to the physical therapist and you can't drive yourself. Now I'm in a position of having to make friends just to have somebody that I can lean on to try to take me somewhere, because I live alone. So it's like, really seriously, is that I've always been independent. I'd like to be able to take care of myself. It's a real ask for me to have to go another path. And even though there's only one of me, there's lots of seniors in Cloverdale. And it's really, really important to have some kind of options available where we have nothing now. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment. This may not be PC, but aging is a disability in our culture. So what you've been maybe thinking around the disability resources and transportation is just going to be expanded for this aging population. So in terms of age, not so much important as the idea of the limitations that are going to be impacted by older people are going to be real similar to the same things you think about in terms of transportation for disabled people.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's something I'm concerned about as well. I mean, we're all gonna get there at some point, so we should invest in the system as a whole. Do we have any other comments or questions? Thank you very much for your presentation. Oh,
I'll just add, the woman on Zoom mentions Cloverdale, and maybe I'm getting too detailed here, but and I know paratransit service, we need more than that, but just, you know, for if it's helpful, Cloverdale does have paratransit service, right? And it's limited within the 3/4 of a mile of Sonoma County Transit's routes, and you know, there's some other drawbacks to it too, right? But you don't have to be within the paratransit. You don't have to live within the paratransit area to get a ride. If you can get a ride into the paratransit area, you can get rides from there. And that's a detail, and I know there's a lot of hurdles there, but I'm just making sure that there is clarity on the services that are available.
One more comment from me. I just want to make sure that when we're talking about paratransit, that's not, I like the way that it was just presented, that we're all aging and aging is a disability. But paratransit has such a narrow focus and narrow definitions that if I wake up some morning and I'm really sick, but I need to get somewhere to go to the urgent care room, let's say, I can't use paratransit for that because I don't have a note from my doctor and I didn't ask for it 2 weeks ago and all those kind of things. It's not readily available. It's available as a systematic approach, but not for personal use. And I just want to make sure that we have that clear.
Sort of, this touches on one of my axes to grind.
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's grind it.
There. But it's really big in Petaluma, but it's really big in other communities that I hang out with and work in, that, you know, trying to keep having cars in the downtown and getting people out of their cars and getting them walking. And a very popular concept that's come up is walk the last mile. And when I innocently ask an elected official or somebody how seniors are supposed to walk the last mile, they say, oh, well, don't worry, they can get handicap placards. And I sort of point out that, you know, I'm guessing, but I would say 99 out of 100 seniors who don't feel able to walk the last mile would not qualify for a handicap parking placard. So you have two movements, which is, you know, climate change, green, get people out of their cars, reduce carbon emissions, with a growing population that actually kind of needs that car and kind of needs to be able to park pretty close to where they're going. And just really wanting to raise people's awareness that those two are a little bit in contrast with each other.
all right, well, very lively discussion. I do appreciate it. All right, we can move on to item 7, Countywide Active Transportation Plan.
Drew, would you mind allowing me to share my screen?
I realized my excitement. Good morning, everyone.
All right, so we've talked with this group about the Countywide Active Transportation Plan a couple of times over the last 1.5 years since we started. The draft plan is now available for public review, and so I wanted to give a little recap of the plan and talk about some of the content and next steps. So the Countywide Active Transportation Plan is acts as a kind of umbrella under which the local plans for each jurisdiction within the county sit. So the local plans are adopted by the local governing bodies and incorporated into the countywide plan as well. as kind of volume 2 to the countywide plan. And here's kind of an outline of what the plans look like. So SETA is through this process of updating the countywide plan. We are also updating plans for 7 out of the 10 jurisdictions in the county. So that includes the unincorporated county, Cloverdale, Healdsburg, Rohnert Park, Cotati, Sonoma, and Sebastopol. Santa Rosa, Petaluma, and Windsor are working independently on updating their active transportation plans right now. And once those are adopted, they can be brought into under the umbrella of the countywide plan as well. So kind of some highlights on the purpose of the plan and major changes since our last plan, which was adopted in 2014, is a focus on all ages and abilities. So creating spaces for people to walk, bike, and roll that are low stress and lower risk to create more opportunities for people to use walking, biking, and rolling as modes of transportation and recreation. And when we use the term roll or rolling, we are kind of expanding this, what was previously the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, to ensure that it includes other types of mobility devices and kind of emerging modes of transportation that people are using, such as electric scooters and skateboards, kind of anything under that realm that where people might use sidewalks and bike lanes.
Yeah.
What are you doing? We are also kind of focusing on regional connections, identifying regional routes between jurisdictions as part of the larger countywide active transportation plan, and focusing on prioritizing projects and identifying funding to focus and streamline implementation. So we began this the progress on this plan last summer, starting with identifying existing conditions and establishing the foundation. We did a technical analysis, including a level of traffic stress analysis. So kind of how comfortable kind of the majority of the population feels on particular roadways, intersections, crossings, and whatnot. And began reaching out to the community fall 2023 to get input on major barriers to active transportation and opportunities. And kind of taking those 3 elements together, we developed proposed projects and programs, and then took those out for public input and engagement in spring of this year. And then with that input, we refined the projects and programs, and developed a funding and implementation chapter, and developed draft plans. So the draft plans for the jurisdictions that are under this process are out for public review right now, as well as a countywide plan. I'll note that for the city of Cotati, they were on an accelerated schedule, and their plan was adopted this last spring. We will be wrapping up and developing final plans next month, although the County of Sonoma is on a little bit extended schedule for that final plan, and looking to adopt the rest of the plans by the end of February. So the overall vision for the plan includes guiding principles to improve safety, connectivity, equity, and quality of life, where biking, walking, and rolling shall be safe and appealing modes for people of all ages and abilities to use for everyday transportation and recreation. And you'll see kind of these themes throughout the plan. The goals provided kind of context to group the policies within the plan, and those include connected and reliable, safe and well-maintained, and community-oriented and place-based. So this slide kind of highlights the bicycle facilities that are existing right now. And if some of the key highlights are that the majority of the existing facilities in the jurisdictions of Sonoma County are bike lanes, also known as kind of class 2 bike lanes, so just the kind of single stripe on the side of the road. And there's a real opportunity to enhance some of those and improve the low stress facilities throughout the county. There's also opportunities to enhance the connections of those facilities to transit, kind of help with that first last mile connection. So in terms of engagement, we have been working with advisory bodies in each jurisdiction participating in the plan, as well as several countywide advisory bodies, and provided milestone updates to each kind of according to the 3 phases that I mentioned earlier, kind of identifying the needs and concerns, reviewing the draft projects and priorities, and then reviewing the draft plans. We also worked with 2 different focus groups to try to reach some of the folks that may not have regularly attend the advisory body meetings or open houses that we did in each jurisdiction. And so we did a youth focus group in coordination with the Latino service providers this January. And we also did a focus group with persons with disabilities. And that was actually in coordination with this committee and various both members and participants. So this is just a very zoomed out map of highlighting the regional routes that we've identified as kind of being priority connections between communities. Those are highlighted or those are kind of the green lines there. And then the Metropolitan Transportation Commission has also identified kind of more broad ranging active transportation corridors that are highlighted in yellow there. So there's quite a lot of overlap, but the regional routes that we've identified are a little bit like refined priorities, Sonoma County. So the idea of all ages and abilities infrastructure really focuses on increasing separation and protection for active modes as vehicle volume and speed increases, kind of ensuring that there is more protection there. So, there's a criteria and best practices show criteria that's been identified for different types of bike lanes on roads with different vehicle speeds and volumes, kind of increasing the protection as the speeds and volumes increase. And so this table shows a summary of the planned facilities in the draft plans for each jurisdiction. The cities that don't have data are the ones that are independently working on their updates separate from this process, and we don't have that data readily available. And then I'll just note that a few of the jurisdictions we're working with, we did sidewalk inventories for as part of this process, and some opted not to incorporate that into this process. So where we do see that information, those are the ones that we did do sidewalk inventories for, and that shows the feet of sidewalk that is proposed to be filled in, where there's either missing sidewalk on one or both sides of the streets. So the countywide plan includes a number of engineering resources for staff at local jurisdictions to use to implement these projects. And that includes a pedestrian toolbox for pedestrian, to enhance pedestrian facilities for safety, as well as kind of a toolbox for bicycle facilities, including traffic calming infrastructure that could be included to increase safety. A number of other resources are included, which I'll kind of, I have a slide for each, but I'll go through them fairly quickly. Always happy to come back to anything that anybody has interested in though. So that includes a white paper on micromobility and some of the more emerging uses, including shared micromobility like bike share and scooter share, and kind of what the state regulations are for those, and as well as kind of indicators of success for those programs. We've included in our appendix bikeway selection and key design attributes appendix, and what would show design options for providing protection along separated bike lanes, treatment options for creating low vehicle speeds on bike boulevards, so kind of physical infrastructure to help slow down vehicles, and various other resources for kind of selecting the appropriate type of bikeway for different facilities. There's a section on quick builds, which is kind of a way for lower costs and quicker turnaround, provide some safety through kind of more temporary infrastructure like paint and bollards and things like that. We have a section on intersection design to really enhance the safety for pedestrians and bicyclists around intersections. And then considerations for amenities to help the comfort and safety for biking, walking, and rolling, and including lighting, shade, tree coverage. That kind of is increasingly important as weather is more severe and we have more hot days and torrential rains. And especially looking at those areas around transit and kind of access close by transit. So some additional content that is included in the countywide priorities include existing programs and practices, kind of identifying those and suggestions for new programs. There's I mentioned a section on implementation, and that includes content on how we prioritize projects in the plan. We looked at a number of different criteria that are typically components for grant applications. So kind of looking at where the industry is heading, but also kind of where policy is focusing, where dollars should be spent. And some of those, a lot of those aren't surrounded by safety and equity, as well as access to highlighted important amenities like schools and transit, things like that. We have a section on funding that includes cost, kind of high-level cost estimates for the facilities that are proposed, and as well as a section on monitoring progress for implementation of the plan. So the draft plans for the cities that are involved in this process are available for public review through November 30th. Kind of a little bit of extension on the timeline for the countywide plan. We've decided to put that out another week, so that we're taking comments on the countywide plan through December 5th, and then the unincorporated counties plan will be available actually for public review through until February. So there's a link in the presentation and in your packet to the website for the project, and you could provide any comments there. And I'm also happy to take any comments or discussion here. I'll try to stop sharing my screen. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering if SCTA is working on, or if somewhere within what you have been talking about involves alternative transportation resources, such as working with like nonprofit volunteer transport systems, or maybe even private transport, Uber-esque kind of businesses that kind of meet some of the, especially the rural area and the more specialized transportation access. I mean, is any of that kind of making sense or going around the sphere?
Yeah, I think I understand your question. So that's not part of the active transportation plan. But, I mean, I think it's something that comes up sometimes, but generally, we work with public agencies, and so cities, the county, and transit agencies. And, I think that likely those things could be partnerships with those entities, right? With
So you're
cities
open
or
to that kind of thing, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So Dana, I would just add that we're currently updating our comprehensive transportation plan that's kind of looks at all modes in the county. So we have a survey open right now. So I'd encourage you to go take the survey and add those thoughts in there. Like
Yeah,
we've
I
noted them
did.
down. Oh, you did? Okay, great. So yeah, it's good to capture that information in the context of that, countywide look at transportation too.
I would just add that you mentioned safe routes to school as one of the programs, and that the AAA currently funds Petaluma People Services Center for the walking school bus. It's a wonderful intergenerational program, and it is a safe routes to school program. And it's easily replicated in multiple any areas. So if there's funding available or you want more information on it, I would definitely recommend talking to PPSC and learning more about it, because it's great. It brings the kids and the older adults together and gets them to school, and there's extra benefits like homework help and just being that grandparent, the adopted grandparent that you want to tell something to, but you don't want to tell your parents. So there's wonderful benefits socially to this program.
That's great. No, that's a really good point. And I could definitely, see if we could incorporate that into the programs for the countywide plan. Could you remind me the name of it again? It's
called the Walking School Bus.
Walking School Bus. Okay.
I believe if you go to the Safe Routes to School website, it should be up there as one of their programs.
Okay.
I know we have one in Petaluma where I don't know if it's pilot or permanent, but the drop-off spot for the walking school bus is PEP housing for seniors.
Mm-hmm.
And the seniors do the walking. And it's a great concept and implementation.
Great. Thank you.
Do they also do bike trains? I've seen those around.
Don't do bicycling that I know. It's mostly walking the kids to school. But yeah, it's great for the parents, because if there's inclement weather or the parent has to get early, there's usually volunteers that will watch the children until they all get together and then they all walk together to school as a group.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much, Dina.
Thank you.
All right, now moving on to item 8, roundtable updates, discussion. We'll start with transit and paratransit operators. Irwin?
Sure. I'm Yuri with City Bus, City of Santa Rosa's transit and paratransit service. See updates. We're putting a new vehicle into service for Oakmont, our Oakmont service in the next few weeks. We're definitely up on paratransit eligibility. We have more people seeking paratransit eligibility than we're about at the levels prior to pandemic. And I think the paratransit application where it's shared between Petaluma, Sonoma County, and City Bus is working well because basically there's one application that is it's the same application regardless of where your eligibility is determined. So that's an easy process when people submit it to the wrong location, and we just share it, and the general public doesn't have to redo an application. So that's worked well. And then there's the regionally, there's the RTC opt-in form. So now if you are eligible for paratransit, you're also eligible for the Clipper RTC card. We see some people taking advantage of that. We definitely see a lot of people not reading that, they're just filling it out, and then they're not really interested in taking fixed route. They just want to use paratransit, so that causes a little confusion. What else? We just opened the transit mall in the city of Santa Rosa was under construction, so it was on First Street, and so we've just moved back into the Second Street transit mall. So the roadbed's been redone. There's different striping to hopefully prevent vehicles from crossing into the transit mall that are just passenger vehicles. They're not or single occupancy vehicles. They're not transit vehicles. There's an extensive cleaning that went on, improved lighting. A number of different features that were updated there, and then we're going to continue to try to make improvements there at the transit mall. Let's see. City Bus just sent an application for a second phase of chargers for our fixed route vehicles, and we're trying to move forward with new purchases there. They're about 2 years till we'll get those vehicles, but that has progressed. I'll leave it with that and pass it on to the next operator.
That me?
Maybe.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, the other one. I don't have much to bring up this time from Golden Gate. On our paratransit side, we're about 55–60% of what we were pre-pandemic. So still quite a bit down on the paratransit. As far as bridge tolls and stuff, that's also down 15% prior. We've definitely seen a shift on commuting. Far less people are commuting, and we're seeing a lot more traffic over the bridge on the weekends. Bus is still at about 50% of that it was before the pandemic, and ferry is creeping up to about 60%. So where we're sitting right now.
And Carly?
My name is Carly. I'm representing Petaluma Transit today. I'll start with some of our paratransit updates. So with the start of our system-wide fare career program, we're seeing significant increases in applications along with requests for applications. And with that, we're seeing a steady increase in ridership. Our ridership has increased 24% from last October, and we're getting closer to reaching our pre-COVID ridership. So we're anticipating reaching that by the end of the fiscal year. I also wanted to go over some updates for Luma Go, which is Petaluma's microtransit service that launched September 30th. So as of last Wednesday, we've completed 1,985 rides with an average of 3.2 passengers per hour. And we're in the process of collecting public comments to kind of guide us towards the next steps of improving the service. And then we're also using LumaGo as transportation for Petaluma's lighted boat parade on December 7th and Luma Ice, which is Petaluma's ice rink, and that will be open in mid-December.
Thank you. And now mobility partners.
Not too many updates. We're gonna be working with helping the MPC provide feedback on any wayfinding signage that is going up at the Transit Mall. San Luis and El Cerrito bus station were the two locations chosen for that pilot program. So we trying to get consumers out there and find feedback on that. Good to hear about LumaGo and that they're getting a lot of rides so soon. And that's about it for us.
Thank you.
I just say at Area Agency on Aging, we're anticipating getting our 5310 grant from Caltrans any day now. Typically it's FTA, so it's a federal fiscal year, October to September. However, here we are almost into December and there's no contracts that have been forthcoming. So I heard there's a delay because there's a issue with our accounting system, but we are getting 2 grants for sure. One will do mobility management and the other one will offer transportation vouchers. So once I have more information, it looks like it could be a January start date, 2-year project. So I can update you from there. And that's it.
Wonderful. Anyone else online? Alrighty. So for future agenda topics, we were thinking of adding an education campaign of fairs, discussing transit integration. If you have any other ideas, please email them to me and we can add them to the agenda. And for other business announcements, comments that you may have, please feel free to share them. I have an announcement. So in January, we'll be appointing our chairs and vice chairs. So please come so we can have a quorum and we can vote them in. And I will do my best to bring donuts. So maybe I can bribe you over. Yeah. Any other announcements? Seeing none. Think we're ready to adjourn. Our next meeting will be January 21st and we are adjourned. There you go. Yay, success.
Join the gapping.
Oh, yeah.